Right now, more than 8 billion of us walk this earth. Cities blaze with light, aircraft crisscross the skies, and our voices travel instantly across oceans. But once, in the deep hush of prehistory, only scattered bands of our ancestors moved like shadows across an untamed world. And then came a revelation carved not in bone, but in stone. Tools discovered on the island of Sulawesi. Tools older than memory. Tools that whisper of a journey 1,000,000 years ago. You close your eyes and imagine it. An island ringed with jungle and sea, where rivers carve valleys and volcanoes simmer in silence. The stones lie waiting in the soil, sharp edges chipped by hands that no longer exist. They're dated between 1 and 1.5 million years old, older than the story of firelight gatherings, older than cave paintings. Whoever left them behind had crossed water that no map of their time recorded. Sulawesi is no small leap. It is cut off from Asia by deep ocean trenches, a realm never bridged by ice or land. To reach it meant daring the currents, watching coastlines sink behind you, trusting a log, a raft, or a desperate faith in survival. Until recently, most believed such feats were impossible for early hominins. The ocean was supposed to be a prison, locking them to continents. Yet here, beneath tropical soil, lies proof that they broke their chains of geography. Maybe it was Homo erectus, the wanderer who already pushed across Asia. Or maybe it was a forgotten cousin, older and stranger, whose name is lost. Whoever they were, they had imagination enough to see across waves and wonder what lay beyond. Can you feel the unease of that thought? 1,000,000 years ago, minds already shaped by daring risk and exploration. Imagine the silence before the launch, the surf licking their ankles, the horizon stretching like a forbidden line. They could not know if land waited out there, only that the sea was both barrier and promise. Every journey would cost lives, every mistake would swallow families whole, and yet the tools remain. The gamble worked. Where are you listening from tonight? Maybe a city where rain paints windows, maybe a quiet house in the Midwest, maybe the back seat of a car on a Texas highway. You and I in comfort, looking back across an ocean of time. They in fear and determination looked forward into the unknown. What does it mean that ancient hands, so far from us, may have lashed logs together and pushed into the surf? What kind of mind stares at a restless horizon and refuses to stay behind? These questions turn stone into prophecy. The stones on Sulawesi are not just artifacts, they are signals, flares launched from the abyss of time. They shatter the notion of human smallness, proving that even 1,000,000 years ago our kind, or something like us, already carried the seed of audacity. The silence of that island is deceptive. Under its soil the message is clear. The sea was never truly closed. Every test whispered the same, terrifying truth. 98.7% of all species that ever lived are gone, erased by extinctions vast and silent. And yet here, on Sulawesi, the stones tell us that our ancestors or their kin defied that pull toward oblivion. The terrifying truth is that survival was never guaranteed. It was wrestled from the jaws of impossible odds. The scale of catastrophe surrounding those early travellers is hard to imagine. The Pleistocene was an age of extremes, when glaciers advanced like slow armies and seas rose and fell like a breath across millennia. Storms could flatten forests, drought could parch continents. To leave shore in such an era was to step into the very teeth of chaos. Can you feel the salt on your lips, the waves slamming against wood, the sudden silence when a raft creaks in darkness? For every group that reached land, others must have vanished beneath the surf, their courage swallowed without trace. This is called the extinction vortex, the spiral in which small groups are dragged down by scarcity, disease, or chance. Imagine a raft of 20 souls leaving an Asian coastline. If a storm took half, the survivors might never rebuild their numbers. If the wrong people were lost, a family line ended forever. And yet, despite this vortex, stone tools remain scattered in Sulawesi's soil. The evidence is relentless. Someone endured. Your heartbeat echoes with theirs. You sit in your room, safe in a bed, while outside rain slides across streets and headlights blur through night. They sat by flickering fires, bodies trembling from hunger, staring at an ocean that seemed endless. Do you sense how thin the line is between them and us? One storm, one drought, one broken raft. And perhaps we would never have existed. The thought is dizzying. Across millennia, survival was not destiny, but chance multiplied by stubborn will. These journeys were not migrations in comfort. They were desperate gambles. Why risk it? Perhaps food had dwindled. Perhaps rival bands pressed too close. Perhaps curiosity itself was too powerful to resist. Whatever the reason, their steps reshaped the map of possibility. And Sulawesi was not empty. When they arrived, the island teemed with giant mammals, reptiles, and birds. The newcomers entered an alien wilderness, every sound unfamiliar, every movement charged with danger. Yet they endured long enough to leave their mark. A flake of stone chipped from a core. A cutting edge designed to skin, to carve, to survive. These artifacts are the only voices they left behind, but in their silence you can hear an echo. We were here. We crossed. We lived. Can you picture the night sky they saw? Stars sharp above the sea, constellations unburdened by city lights. Did they chart their courses by those stars? Did they whisper stories to children about islands waiting beyond? In every chipped stone there is an unspoken myth that the world was not bound by shorelines. Yet this triumph carried a price so strange it would rewrite everything. Inside every one of us, in the spiral of DNA coiled like ancient script, there lies a scar. It is not visible in the mirror, not painted on our skin, but engraved into our chromosomes. At some moment in our deep past, two ancestral chromosomes fused into one, leaving us with 23 pairs instead of 24. That fusion is not found in our closest living relatives, the chimpanzees and gorillas. It is a mutation so unlikely it feels like the universe took a gamble on us. And the echo of that gamble lives in every cell of your body right now. Picture it. The genetic strands of an ancestor twisting, replicating, stuttering, until suddenly, two separate chromosomes joined. Most such changes would end in silence, in the stillness of death. But this one endured. Why? Was it chance alone, or did it grant an unseen advantage? Scientists sifted genomes like detectives at a crime scene, searching for fingerprints, and again the same pattern appeared. The fusion was real, and it marked us as a species touched by an improbable event. The stones of Sulawesi remind us that survival was always perilous. But here in our chromosomes lies a second story, one hidden in flesh and blood. Imagine if that fusion had never occurred. Would we exist? Or would the world still be ruled by other hominins, erect, capable, voyaging, but not quite us? The thought lingers like a shadow, identity shaped by a single molecular accident. Walk into the silence of a laboratory, the hum of machines sequencing strands. Each test returns the same result, unchanging, undeniable. A scar inside us carried from birth to death, from ancestor to child. It is as if nature left a reminder. You are the descendants of survivors, but also the children of mutation. Every choice made by those who crossed seas, every chromosome passed down, converged into the present moment where you breathe, read, and wonder. What did that fusion mean for the minds of our ancestors? Some suggest it unlocked potential, rewiring development, nudging intelligence into new territories. Others argue it was neutral, a mere quirk carried along by chance. But standing on the edge of Sulawesi's cliffs, with the sea roaring below, you cannot help but sense that survival and strangeness were always entwined. The voyagers who cut stone and risked the sea carried this fusion within them, an invisible marker of a destiny unfolding. Think of a raft sliding from shore. Think of hands grasping rough-hewn paddles, Children clinging to mothers, men shouting into wind. In those fragile bodies beat hearts that already bore the fused scar of chromosomes. They were not yet us, and yet they were, bridging biology and possibility. The line between them and us blurs like the horizon where sky touches sea. Every fragment of bone, every flake of stone, every twist of DNA tells us the same thing. Our story is not only about survival, but about improbability. We exist because catastrophe did not erase us, because oceans did not stop us, because a genetic accident persisted against all odds. We were staring at a locked book that contained the secret of why we exist. The book was locked not with iron or wood, but with time itself. Fossils crumbled, bones vanished, stories dissolved into soil. What remained were gaps, voids that stretched for hundreds of thousands of years, as if entire chapters of humanity's past had been torn away. Sulawesi's stones were one page of that lost book, the fused chromosomes another. And between them lies a silence so vast it echoes louder than any record we possess. Picture a desert of memory. You walk across it, sand shifting beneath your feet, and suddenly you stumble on a shard of pottery, a chipped tool, a fossil tooth. Each fragment is a syllable from a sentence you can't fully read. The locked book is scattered like this, broken phrases buried across continents. The more we find, the more we realise how much is missing. Scientists sometimes call this the fossil gap, but to the imagination it feels like a black ocean stretching across prehistory. Why do we find stone tools without bones? Why do bones vanish without artefacts? Were there species that lived, thrived, and vanished without leaving any clear trace at all? The questions rise like heat waves. In the silence of these missing records, legends and possibilities take shape. Close your eyes and step into that silence. The year might be 1.2 million years ago. A band of hominins leaves footprints in soft volcanic ash, each toe pressed with weight and life. Rain falls, wind erases, the ash hardens, the prints fade. By now, nothing remains but emptiness. For every fossil we uncover, how many millions of lives have dissolved without witness? Our story is not written in ink but in absence. And yet, Sulawesi defies that absence. Those tools are stubborn fragments, proclaiming that someone crossed seas when no one believed they could. They are proof carved in stone that the locked book is not entirely lost. But even here the mystery deepens. No bones accompany them. Who held these tools? Were they Homo erectus, with strong brows and sturdy limbs? Or were they an unknown cousin, now erased, their name forever unspoken? Imagine standing by a dig site, the air heavy with heat, soil clinging to the skin. A trowel scrapes, the earth parts, and suddenly the glint of stone emerges. Your breath halts. It is not just an object. It is a message across 1,000,000 years. We were here. We dreamed beyond the horizon. And yet the speaker remains faceless. The book gives us words without their author. This is the haunting truth. Most of human history has no witnesses left. This silence between discoveries is wider than the stories we can tell. Each artifact is a pinprick of light in a sky otherwise dark. And as you look at that darkness, you cannot help but wonder, what else did we lose? Which minds, which languages, which visions were swallowed? Whole! The locked book is still closed, but fragments keep slipping through. And one day, perhaps, we will realise that the missing pages are not just absence. They are warning, they are prophecy, they are the silence before revelation. What waited in those missing pages was stranger than we dared imagine. From the soil of forgotten caves to the dust of river valleys, evidence kept surfacing that did not fit neatly into the story we thought we knew. Teeth too large for Homo erectus, tools too refined for the age assigned to them, DNA fragments buried in bones from Siberia that spoke of cousins we never met. The locked book, once thought to hold only a single narrative, revealed that humanity was never alone. Imagine the shock. For centuries we assumed a straight line, a ladder climbing from ape to human, rung by rung. But the fossil record insists otherwise. It is not a ladder, it is a braided river, channels forking and rejoining, streams vanishing underground only to surge back in another form. We were never a single line of progress. We were a crowd of experiments. Sulawesi's stones hint at one of those experiments, a population daring enough to cross seas 1,000,000 years ago. Elsewhere, fossils uncovered in Flores tell of Homo floresiensis, the so-called hobbits, small-bodied, small-brained, yet astonishingly resourceful. In Siberia's Denisova cave, a single finger bone revealed an entire lineage, the Denisovans, who interwove with us and still live on in fragments of our DNA. Each discovery opens another page in the missing book, and each page contradicts the neatness of the old tale. Close your eyes and imagine standing in a clearing 100,000 years ago. The firelight flickers. Across from you, another band emerges from the trees. They are not Neanderthals, not sapiens, but something else. Their faces familiar yet strange, their language incomprehensible, their presence undeniable. The world of our ancestors was never empty, never silent. It was crowded with kin we no longer remember. How unsettling is that thought? We were not the only storytellers. The night once held many voices, many fires burning against the dark. For each group that survived long enough to leave echoes in our genes or tools in the ground, countless others vanished without trace. To stand in the present is to stand atop a mound of forgotten experiments. The stranger truth is this: the more we search, the more the boundaries between us and them dissolve. A Homo erectus hand may have chipped Sulawesi stones, but perhaps a Denisovan's child carried that hand axe. Perhaps species we have not yet named set their gaze across the water and launched into the unknown. These were not animals blind to possibility. They were minds driven by the same restless urge that still propels us into space today. And perhaps that is the revelation hidden in the missing pages. That audacity, not anatomy, defined survival. Those who dared, whether hobbits on Flores, voyagers to Sulawesi, or toolmakers in the Caucasus, left imprints that whisper to us now. Not all lines continued, but all of them mattered. What we found in the gaps was not emptiness, but multiplicity, an ancient world alive with variations of humanity, each carrying dreams and fears across landscapes that now seem impossibly distant. We were not alone, we never were, and if the world once held many kinds of humans, what happened when their paths collided in the shadows of firelight? You wake in that world. The air smells of smoke and damp earth, the night pierced by sparks rising from a fire. Around you, figures shift in the dark, your own band, thin with hunger, weary from travel. But beyond the ring of flames, other eyes glimmer. Not beasts, not quite strangers. Humans and not humans. The forest holds its breath, as if aware that history itself waits for what happens next. The psychological weight of such encounters is almost unbearable to imagine. To see a face that reflects your own, but altered. Brow heavier, nose broader, speech unrecognizable. Do you feel fear or recognition? Do you reach for a stone blade or extend an open hand? In the crackle of firelight, every instinct wars within you. The urge to protect, the urge to communicate, the urge to dominate. This was no abstract dilemma. For our ancestors, it was a matter of survival. Step closer in your mind. You hear guttural sounds, rhythmic but strange, drifting across the flames. You cannot pass the meaning, but you understand intent. They are like you, yet not. Their fire glows, their children stir, their tools gleam faintly in the dark. The realization blooms cold. This world is not yours alone. It never was. Sulawesi's voyagers had already proven that seas were crossable. Flores revealed small-bodied cousins who endured in isolation. Denisova whispered of a lineage we never saw, yet whose genes ripple still in our blood. Each of these worlds could collide, not as distant tales, but as lived encounters. paths crossing in valleys, in forests, along riverbanks under silent stars. And here lies the terror and the wonder. Meeting another human species was not like meeting wolves or lions. It was like staring into a mirror warped by time. Their hands, like yours, gripped tools. Their eyes, like yours, flickered with thought. Their hearts, like yours, beat with fear and fire. Confrontation was inevitable, but so was connection. Perhaps some meetings ended in violence, raids in the night, one band scattering another. Perhaps others ended in trade, meat for stone, shells for pigments, and sometimes flesh entwined with flesh, children born who carried both bloodlines forward. Science now tells us this is true. We carry the whispers of Neanderthals and Denisovans inside us. But in the moment there was no science, only instinct and decision. Now imagine the psychological storm, knowing you're not alone, but also not secure. How? Do you teach a child that there are others who look almost the same but are not? How do you guard against them, or ally with them? Every firelit encounter carried the weight of destiny. Close your eyes tonight and feel it. The silence of the forest, the watchful eyes in the dark, the shifting of fire's edge. Your heart pounds as theirs once did. Will you step forward into contact or retreat into shadows? The question lingered for generations, unanswered, until at last patterns emerged. Some species endured, others vanished, their tools left behind as ghostly signatures of encounters long forgotten. But for those who survived the darkness, survival itself demanded something greater than fire or stone. It demanded the birth of something invisible, something that would bind minds together. It demanded the spark of language, not the guttural cries of warning or the sharp barks of command, but something deeper, the birth of symbols, the weaving of meaning into sound. Imagine a night when one ancestor shaped a new noise, not just a call, but a word. And in that moment, the world widened. Firelight became brighter, danger more manageable, memory more enduring. Language was not merely communication. It was a bridge over silence. Picture a child at the edge of the fire, eyes wide as an elder utters sounds that carry more than immediate instruction. The sounds form a map of the past, where the river bends, where the herd once grazed, where death stalked in shadows. In those syllables, the child inherits a history they never lived. This was the first archive, not carved in stone, but breathed into air. Fragile, yet powerful. The psychology of language is almost unfathomable. Words allow us to share what does not exist here and now. Tomorrow's hunt, yesterday's sorrow, the imagined danger of spirits in the forest. Suddenly, cooperation expands beyond instinct. The tribe becomes more than a cluster of bodies. It becomes a network of minds, each thought amplifying the others. And here lies the marvel. Language is not only survival, it is imagination. With it, we painted the unseen, conjured myths, and gave names to stars. Those voyagers to Sulawesi may have spoken in tongues lost forever, but without language, how could they plan a sea crossing? How could they convince others to step onto rafts and face horizons that seemed endless? Language was the invisible technology that rivaled fire and stone. Yet the gift was double-edged. With language came persuasion, deception, manipulation. A leader could rally but also mislead. A parent could soothe but also frighten. Words cut deeper than blades, binding communities even as they bred conflict. Still, across 1,000,000 years, the balance favoured survival. Those who spoke endured. Those who remained mute faded. Close your eyes tonight and imagine that first exchange. Two strangers, two different kinds of humans, meeting in a clearing. Their words clash, incomprehensible, but gestures bridge the gap. A hand raised, food offered, danger signalled. Here, in this fragile overlap, language forged alliances across species lines, and sometimes, across those lines, families were born. The fire crackles, the night deepens, and with words we began to dream collectively. To tell stories of ancestors, to warn of storms, to plan for hunts not yet begun. It was language that turned survival from moment to moment into generations upon generations, and it was language that made encounters between human species not only possible but transformative. On Sulawesi, tools tell us of daring. In our genomes, scars tell us of survival. But in the spaces between firelight and darkness, it was language that ensured we did not vanish like so many others. We carried stories across oceans as surely as we carried stone blades, and with words, a new horizon opened. The first myths, the first shared dreams, the first whispers of what it meant to be human. But every myth has a shadow, and every dream has a cost. What happened when words grew sharper than stone and turned one kind of human against another? You stand at the edge of a clearing where two fires burn. One is yours, the other theirs. Smoke spirals upward, carrying the smell of roasted meat, the laughter of children, the murmur of unfamiliar voices. Words, those fragile tools that could unite, also sow suspicion. Every whisper of betrayal, every insult, every boast cuts deeper than a blade, and soon the night is no longer shared but divided. The rise of language brought more than cooperation. It brought boundaries. A name for your band meant identity. A name for theirs meant difference. To speak was to draw lines. Us and them, kin and stranger, ally and enemy. It was a power beyond fire and stone, for with fire you could cook a meal, with stone you could cut a hide, but with words you could ignite war. Imagine the psychological burden of those first divisions. To hear another tongue was to feel both recognition and unease. Their laughter sounded like yours, yet not. Their warnings echoed with rhythm, yet meaning slipped through your grasp. Suspicion seeped into every encounter. Could they be trusted? Would they raid in the night? Or would they sit by your fire as kin? Language sharpened memory. An injury was not forgotten. It was retold, relived, rekindled until vengeance seemed as natural as breath. Stories of betrayal burned longer than wounds. Around campfires, elders whispered not only myths of gods and spirits, but also tales of neighbours who wronged them, who must be watched, who must be resisted. And yet, paradox lingered. The same words that deepened division also allowed alliances. With careful gestures, with mimicked sounds, humans forged fragile truces. A hunt shared, a marriage arranged, a secret path to water revealed. For some, words healed wounds. For others, they carved them deeper. The double edge could never be dulled. Picture a night when the First War began. Not armies in ranks, but small bands clashing in the dark. Shouts cracked the silence. Stones shattered bone. Flames rose as shelters burned. In that chaos, language echoed louder than weapons. It gave orders, spread fear, and carried news to those too far to see. Words stretched the battlefield beyond the clearing, ensuring the conflict lived on long after the last ember died. And yet, not all shadows were born of hatred. Language also carried sorrow. Imagine a mother mourning her child, shaping the first lament. Or a father teaching his son to avoid the river that claimed lives. These words carried grief, love, hope. But in the same breath, they carried rage. Humanity's greatest gift had no master. The voyagers of Sulawesi, the hobbits of Flores, the Denisovans of Siberia, all may have shaped words in their own way. Perhaps their languages are gone, dissolved like smoke, but their echoes remain in our blood and our bones. We're children of words, shaped, divided, and united by them. But the true crucible came not from voices alone. It came when hands, guided by words, shaped tools with precision far beyond crude stone flakes. The Upper Paleolithic dawned, and with it came weapons and art, blades and beauty. The line between survival and supremacy sharpened, and soon the clash of species would not be fought only with voices or with firelight, It would be fought with inventions that would change the balance forever. The invention was not a single weapon, but an explosion of creativity, the Upper Paleolithic toolkit. In caves and open plains, humans began shaping blades sharper than anything the world had yet seen. Thin flakes struck from stone cores, needles of bone drilled with holes, harpoons carved from antler to pierce the bodies of fish. It was not survival by chance anymore. It was survival by design. Close your eyes and imagine holding one of those blades. The edge gleams with an intent that feels almost modern. A hunter could strike cleanly, quickly. A seamstress could stitch hides into garments tight against the cold. Each innovation was more than a tool. It was an extension of thought, an expression of imagination turned into matter. The mind was no longer just surviving, it was engineering the future. This moment was the dawn of symbolic life as well. Alongside weapons came art. In Europe's caves, horses and bison galloped across stone walls, painted with ochre and charcoal. In Asia, carved figurines emerged, spirits shaped in ivory, dreams given form. Even in Sulawesi itself, the earliest known hand stencils appeared, red silhouettes pressed against cave walls more than 40,000 years ago. To place a hand upon stone was to declare existence. I was here. I lived. I remembered. The psychological leap was staggering. Tools were not just about meat and shelter. They were about meaning. To carve, to paint, to pierce bone with precision was to say, we are more than survival. We are storytellers. And with every stroke, the gap widened between us and those we shared the world with. Neanderthals were skilled hunters. Denisovans endured in harsh mountain realms. Yet their toolkits remained simpler, their art scarcer, their expression quieter. When Homo sapiens refined blades, crafted nets, and adorned their bodies with shells and pigments, the balance shifted irrevocably. No longer was survival only about strength of limb. It was about networks of knowledge, skills passed down, technologies shared. Picture a hunting party armed with finely crafted spears tipped with stone blades. They move as one, coordinated by words, driven by strategy. Their prey falls quickly, efficiently. Now picture a rival band, wielding cruder weapons, slower to strike, less able to plan. The outcome is not in doubt. For the first time, technology became a dividing line between extinction and endurance. But innovation was not only about the hunt. It was about warmth against ice, music echoing in caves, beads strung across necks in patterns of beauty. These objects were symbols, binding groups together through shared culture. A necklace was not merely decoration. It was identity, allegiance, love. In the harshness of the Paleolithic, culture became armour as strong as any blade. And yet, each advancement carried a shadow. The more tools we shaped, the more power tilted toward us. The others, those with fire and strength but fewer words, simpler tools, began to fade. Step by step, innovation became a weapon sharper than stone. The Upper Paleolithic toolkit was more than progress. It was prophecy. It foretold a world in which only one humankind would remain. And in the growing silence, as others began to vanish, one question echoed. Why did we survive while they did not? The question drifts like smoke across the ages, impossible to ignore. Neanderthals were strong. Denisovans adapted to the heights of mountains. Flores hominins endured in their island world. Yet one by one their fires went dark, their voices silenced. Only we remained. Why? Some point to climate, the great cycles of ice and thaw that reshaped continents. Others blame chance, a volcanic eruption, a disease, a drought striking at the wrong time. But beneath these explanations lies something deeper, more unsettling. Perhaps the key difference was not in muscle nor in endurance, but in the way our minds work together. Step into a cave where sapiens huddle against the cold. The walls gleam with ochre drawings, mammoths and horses leaping in firelight. A drumbeat rises from hands striking stretched hide. A flute carved from bone sends music spiralling into the dark. This is more than survival. This is culture, binding hearts through beauty and rhythm. Around the fire, stories flow. Myths of origin, warnings of danger, dreams of future hunts. The tribe is not just a collection of bodies. It is a symphony of minds. Now step into another cave where Neanderthals rest. Their tools are sturdy, their fires bright, but the silence is heavier. They made art too, yes, but rarer, quieter. They buried their dead, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with pigments. They were not mindless brutes, but something was missing. The web of culture may not have bound them as tightly, may not have carried their knowledge as far. Our survival may have been a matter of scale, networks vast enough to preserve memory, words vivid enough to stir loyalty, rituals strong enough to hold communities together even through famine and storm. We became a species of cooperation on an unprecedented level. Where Neanderthals lived in smaller bands, we forged alliances across valleys, across rivers, across time itself. And cooperation breeds resilience. One village starves, another shares. One band falters, another lends hunters. Knowledge leaps from group to group until innovation spread like wildfire. The Upper Paleolithic toolkit was not the work of one genius, but of countless voices echoing ideas. In our hands, progress accelerated. In theirs, perhaps it stalled. But survival was not without cruelty. When resources grew scarce, encounters could turn violent. Sapiens clashed with Neanderthals in Europe, with Denisovans in Asia, with others whose names are lost. In those encounters, numbers mattered, weapons mattered, words mattered. Slowly, inexorably, we filled the spaces they once held. Their stories grew fewer, their artifacts rarer, their shadows fading into silence. And yet, they are not gone. In every heartbeat today, traces of them remain. 2% of Neanderthal still walks in our veins. Fragments of Denisovan DNA help Tibetans breathe thin mountain air. The vanished are not fully lost. They are folded into us, living as whispers in our blood. The question then transforms. Why did we survive while they did not? Perhaps the answer is this. They survive in us. Their extinction was not absolute. It was an absorption, a merging, a legacy we carry unknowing. But survival through merging carried another consequence, one just as profound as any tool or weapon. In the marrow of our bones and the spirals of our DNA, their presence lingers, shaping who we are even now. It is there, hidden, that the next chapter begins. The chapter does not open in silence but in expansion. From the edges of Africa, our ancestors surged outward, carrying fire, words and tools like banners of destiny. Valleys once empty of sapiens filled with their footprints. Rivers that had known only Neanderthals or Denisovans now carried the voices of new arrivals. The world was no longer partitioned. It was becoming a stage for a singular drama, the rise of Homo sapiens. Imagine standing at the threshold of that expansion. A group departs at dawn, packs heavy with stone blades, spears tipped with bone, and the unseen cargo of myths and songs. Their eyes turned toward landscapes none of their kin had ever walked. Frozen tundras, dense forests, endless deserts. Each step carried not just survival, but ambition. The difference was not only in what they had, but in how they imagined the future. And the imagination spread like wildfire. In less than 50,000 years, a heartbeat in geological time, Homo sapiens occupied Africa, Europe, Asia, and the islands of the Pacific. They painted on cavern walls in France and Spain, carved figurines in Siberia, pressed their hands against stone in Sulawesi. The explosion of art was not decoration but declaration. It said, "We are here. We are many. We will endure." This was the evolutionary explosion, a flourishing that outpaced anything seen before. The psychological weight of this moment is staggering. One species, once a fragile band of survivors, multiplied into millions. Their gatherings grew from tribes to networks, from networks to cultures, from cultures to civilizations in waiting. You can almost hear the rising hum of humanity, like a chorus swelling toward crescendo. But every expansion has a shadow. For every valley filled with sapiens, another kind of human retreated. Neanderthals dwindled in the caves of Europe. Denisovans faded in their mountain strongholds. The hobbits of Flores disappeared into myth. And yet traces of them lingered. Their genes fused with ours, hidden gifts of resilience, stronger immune systems, adaptations to altitude, fragments of ancient strength sewn into our blood. Consider the paradox. We expanded not alone, but carrying within us the remnants of those we replaced. Our survival was not pure, it was hybrid, layered, complex. The story is not of one line triumphing over all others, but of one line absorbing, inheriting, reshaping. Even in victory we remained mosaics. Close your eyes and imagine the weight of this inheritance. When you breathe on a mountain, when your skin fights a virus, when your blood remembers how to endure famine, you are not only sapiens, you are a chorus of vanished cousins still singing in silence. Expansion did not erase them. It wove them into us. And yet the triumph was real. No other species carved its mark so widely. No other voice echoed so loudly. By 40,000 years ago, the Earth itself had become our canvas, our arena, our crucible. We had risen, multiplied, and spread like fire across dry grass. But triumph is never final. The question lingers like smoke on the horizon. If we became the last of our kind, what price did the world pay for our ascendance? The price was written in silence. One by one, the other human species vanished. The Neanderthals, who had endured ice and storm, disappeared from their caves. The Denisovans, who left only fragments of bone in Siberia, dissolved into shadows. The hobbits of Flores, so small and resourceful, faded without farewell. The firelit gatherings of many species shrank to one. The earth that once rang with multiple voices now carried only ours, and with that silence came a burden. To outlive others is to inherit their absence. Every river we crossed, every valley we claimed, left, fewer places for them to endure. Their final moments are lost to us. No witness, no record, only bones in soil and traces in blood. Yet the silence of their passing is loud. It tells us that survival was not gentle. It was conquest written in hunger, in cold, in conflict. Still, their legacy did not die. It seeped into us, hidden in DNA like embers carried forward. The Denisovans live on in the lungs of Tibetans who breathe thin mountain air. Neanderthal fragments help our immune systems fight disease. Even extinction was not complete. It was transformation, a weaving together of bloodlines into a single tapestry. We are not only sapiens, we are mosaics of the lost. This truth reframes our triumph. We did not merely win, we absorbed. Their survival is entwined with ours, even as their names fade. When you lift your hand, you may carry the strength of a Neanderthal wrist. When you dream, perhaps some shadow of a Denisovan imagination hums inside you. Our bodies are archives more faithful than any cave painting. Picture this inheritance as fire. Flames leap from torch to torch, passed along through generations. Some torches sputter, some extinguish, but the flame continues, altered with every hand that carries it. We are that flame, a blend of sparks gathered from species now gone, each one shaping how brightly we burn. Yet the silence persists. Imagine walking through a valley where Neanderthals once hunted. The forests have reclaimed their camps. The rivers flow past unmarked shores. No laughter, no footsteps, no smoke, just wind. Their absence is palpable, a ghost pressing against the present. In that stillness, we feel the weight of our inheritance. Our expansion was breathtaking, but it was also lonely. The world became ours, but emptier. We filled the silence with songs, with art, with language, but somewhere deep inside we knew. Once there were others, and now there are none. This is the paradox of our triumph. We inherited their strengths, but not their presence. We carry their genes, but not their voices. Their stories ended, but their fragments walk with us, unseen. The silence is not just theirs, it is ours to bear. And yet, in that silence lies a challenge. To remember that we are not a single creation, but a chorus of many. To forget that would be to misread the book of our existence. For in the next chapter, the chorus becomes clearer, and 3 names emerge like constellations: Neanderthal, Denisovan, and Sapiens, the last trio of humanity standing. The Ice Age world was vast and unforgiving. Yet in its frozen grip, 3 kinds of humans endured. Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, and Sapiens rising from Africa. They were not myths, not fragments, but real, breathing people. Imagine them like 3 fires burning across a dark plain, separate, distant, yet flickering against the same wind. The Neanderthals had thick bones, powerful shoulders, and eyes that scanned icy horizons. They crafted sturdy tools, built shelters against the cold, and hunted the great beasts of their age: mammoths, rhinoceroses, and bison. For 200,000 years they thrived in lands we once believed too harsh for survival. Their bodies were adapted to ice, their strength a fortress against winter. Far to the east, in the shadow of Siberian mountains, the Denisovans lived. We know them only by fragments: a tooth, a bone, a trace of DNA. But in that genetic whisper, we learn they were survivors of high places, mountain dwellers whose blood carried secrets of endurance. In their veins ran adaptations that would later help Tibetans live at impossible altitudes. Their voices are gone, but their breath lingers in ours. And then, from the savannas of Africa, came Homo sapiens, us. Thinner-boned, longer-limbed, less built for brute survival, but carrying something the others did not: a mind shaped by story, by imagination, by relentless curiosity. Where Neanderthals mastered strength and Denisovans mastered endurance, Sapiens mastered possibility. Now picture the Ice Age as a great chessboard. Across its frozen squares, 3 players moved, sometimes colliding, sometimes avoiding one another, sometimes merging. Valleys echoed with their hunts, caves flickered with their fires. It was not a world of one species ruling, it was a crowded stage of rivals and kin. Yet the differences between them were not only in bone or blood, they were in culture. Neanderthals made tools, but ours became blades of elegance. They buried their dead, but ours painted myths on cavern walls. Denisovans adapted to heights, but we adapted to ideas, trading them, spreading them, carrying them further than any horizon had ever known. Still, it was not a simple contest. In some valleys, Neanderthals outnumbered Sapiens. In others, Denisovans thrived where we could not. Encounters did not always end in war, sometimes they ended in family. Children born of mixed unions carried new strengths, blending bloodlines across species. Our genomes today still sing with their echoes. We are hybrids, proof that the chorus of 3 was not always divided. But the balance was fragile. Each fire burned, but only one would blaze across the world. The Neanderthal's strength faltered. The Denisovans' endurance dwindled. The Sapiens' imagination surged. And slowly, inevitably, the chessboard emptied of players, until only one remained. Close your eyes and imagine the moment when 3 became 2, when the voices of Denisovans faded into silence. Their mountains grew quiet, their fires extinguished. Only Neanderthals and Sapiens remained, 2 survivors staring across the Ice Age wilderness at each other. And in that narrowing silence, the question sharpened. When kin become rivals, how do you choose between coexistence and conquest? The answer was not written in treaties or carved on stone, but in the fragile theatre of survival. Neanderthals and Sapiens stood face to face in valleys of Europe, 2 versions of humanity separated by subtle differences, yet those differences would decide the future. Imagine a Neanderthal band emerging from a pine forest, their breath steaming in the icy air. Their bodies were stronger, their frames thicker, their bones forged for cold. They hunted with thrusting spears, closing in on prey with brutal strength. Across the valley, sapiens gathered, thinner, swifter, armed with lighter spears thrown from a distance, nets for trapping, and words to coordinate hunts. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension. At first, coexistence was possible. Archaeological traces suggest Neanderthals and sapiens lived side by side for thousands of years. Campsites overlapped, tool types mingled. There were children born of both lineages, their genes still alive in us today. Around some fires, the two groups may have exchanged food, gestures, even fragments of language. For a time, humanity was not singular but plural. Yet the shadow of rivalry grew. When game grew scarce, who claimed the herds? When ice advanced, who held the caves? Strength battled imagination. Neanderthals' tools were powerful but less adaptable, their bands smaller, their networks weaker. Sapiens spread knowledge swiftly, carrying strategies from one valley to the next. What one tribe learned, many tribes inherited. This web of exchange tilted the balance. The psychological toll must have been immense. To a Neanderthal, sapiens must have seemed strange, more delicate in form yet unrelenting in number, their voices louder, their presence swelling like a tide. To a sapien, Neanderthals were both kin and competitor, familiar, yet obstacles on the path to survival. Was there admiration in those encounters? Fear? Envy? Perhaps all three tangled in the firelight. And still there were moments of intimacy. Picture a sapiens woman and a Neanderthal man sharing a shelter against a storm, their breaths mingling in the dark. Picture a child born of such a union, carrying both lineages forward. That child's descendants may live today, their DNA entwined with ours. Even as rivalry loomed, tenderness flickered. Humanity has always walked with contradiction, but tenderness alone could not alter destiny. Sapiens multiplied, spreading faster, hunting more efficiently, surviving longer. Neanderthals dwindled, their numbers thinned to whispers, until the forests that once rang with their voices fell silent. Their firelight died out, leaving only ours. Still, the story is not only of conquest, it is of inheritance. Neanderthals shaped us as much as we erased them. Their genes ripple in our immunity, in our skin, in our very blood. They are gone, yet not lost. Their absence is visible, but their presence is hidden within us. Close your eyes and imagine the last Neanderthal camp. The fire burns low, the wind howls, the children sleep. Across the horizon, sapiens' fires multiply, flickering like stars. One world is ending, another beginning. The silence of their departure is not just extinction, it is the passing of a torch. And far to the east, in mountains where the air thins and the cold bites deeper, another fire still burned, the last refuge of the Denisovans, waiting for their own encounter with us. High in the Siberian ranges, the Denisovans endured in shadows we can scarcely imagine. The caves they inhabited were windows into eternity, smoke-blackened ceilings, hearths glowing against the dark, fragments of bone and tooth left behind as whispers of a vanished people. Their bodies were forged for survival in places where breath itself was a struggle, lungs labouring in the thin air, hearts beating heavy to draw life from the sky. They were not myths, though they nearly became one. For thousands of years their fires flickered unseen, their presence hidden even from their neighbours. It was only in the 21st century, when a child's finger bone yielded ancient DNA, that their story came rushing back. From that fragment, a revelation. Here was not Neanderthal, not sapiens, but a third lineage, unknown and unimagined. And yet Denisovans were not strangers to us. They met us, mingled with us, became part of us. Their genes still live in the people of Melanesia, in Tibetans who breathe effortlessly where others gasp. This inheritance is proof that encounters in those mountain valleys were not only hostile, They were intimate. Flesh met flesh. Bloodlines merged. Families were born that bridged species. We carry their resilience within us, their survival written into our lungs and blood. Close your eyes and step into a Denisovan night. The cave is cold, but the fire burns. A child sleeps wrapped in furs. Outside, the wind claws the stone, and snow drifts against the entrance. In that stillness, voices murmur in a tongue long forgotten. They are like us, yet different. Their hands fashion tools, their eyes gleam with intelligence. In the silence, you realize the world once belonged to more than one kind of human. And still, the tide of sapiens rose. We spread with speed and ambition, carrying tools, art, and language. Denisovans, fewer in number, dwindled. Their last strongholds echoed with silence. By the time our ancestors pressed deeper into Asia, the Denisovan presence had thinned to shadows. Their fires died out not with a roar but with a whisper. Yet extinction is not the right word. They did not vanish completely. They survive as fragments within us, written in the code of our being. Every heartbeat at high altitude, every immune defense against ancient sickness, carries their legacy. We are their descendants as much as we are sapiens. Imagine the psychological truth of that inheritance. We are haunted by their absence even as we are shaped by their presence. They live on in the unseen, a chorus of forgotten voices embedded in our cells. The locked book of humanity is not only ours, it is theirs and Neanderthals, and the unknown others who never left names at all. The trio of humanity, Neanderthal, Denisovan, sapiens, once filled the Ice Age with voices, but soon too fell silent. Only one remained to carry the torch into the future. And with that torch came firelight not of survival alone, but of creation. Art, music, myth. These would become the new weapons of endurance, reshaping not only the earth but the very idea of what it meant to be human. The Paleolithic dawn was not only a time of blades and spears, but of stories whispered in caves, of rhythms struck on hollow bones, of visions painted on stone. In the flicker of firelight, hands pressed against cavern walls, leaving red silhouettes that still stare back at us after 40,000 years. Each handprint was both a mark of presence and a cry across time. I was here. I dreamed. But creation was not separate from survival. It was its engine. Songs taught rhythm for work and for war. Myths explained the world, binding scattered bands into tribes with shared meaning. Painted animals on cave walls were not only art, they were prayers, strategies, rehearsals of the hunt. The invisible world, the world of symbols, became as powerful as the visible one. Language had already unlocked cooperation, but now culture wove that cooperation into permanence. A spear was useful, a story made the spear unforgettable, a tool could be lost, a song preserved the knowledge to rebuild it. Around firelight, humans did not merely eat. They rehearsed futures, remembered pasts, and imagined what lay beyond. Imagine sitting in a cave on Sulawesi, flames painting shadows across the walls. Beside you, an elder tells of a crossing, the sea dark and endless, the raft fragile, the horizon uncertain. The children listen wide-eyed, the memory of daring carried into the next generation. Myth preserved what flesh alone could not. And through this preservation, the impossible became possible again. Neanderthals had fire, Denisovans had strength, but sapiens had stories, and stories multiply faster than numbers. Culture gave us a kind of immortality. Knowledge no longer died with one body but spread through memory and ritual. This was our true weapon, not stone or bone, but imagination shared. The psychological leap was staggering. To live not just in the present moment, but in remembered past and imagined future, was to transcend survival. We began to see ourselves as part of something larger, ancestors, descendants, a chain unbroken. And with that chain came responsibility, to pass down fire, to pass down words, to pass down visions of what it meant to belong. Yet even as myths bound us together, they could divide us. One story marked a tribe as chosen, another painted outsiders as enemies. Shared meaning created unity, but also exclusion. Culture was as sharp as any blade. With symbols, we drew lines between us and them, not just in flesh, but in belief. Still, the firelight of creation blazed higher than its shadows. It transformed existence from endurance into expression. It gave humanity a pulse beyond biology, a rhythm of song, of story, of art. When sapiens met Neanderthals or Denisovans, the advantage was not only in tools, but in the ability to bind large groups through shared visions. Close your eyes and hear it. The hum of voices rising together, the stamping of feet in ritual, the echo of flutes in darkened caves. These were not luxuries of survival. They were survival itself. They kept fear at bay, sharpened memory, strengthened identity. And from these sparks came the first true social structures, tribes larger than families, bound not by blood alone but by belief, ritual, and shared imagination. It was within these structures that humanity's destiny crystallized. And soon, these gatherings would lead to something even more profound. The first encounters between entire species, not just in chance meetings, but in cultures facing one another. Picture two fires burning on opposite sides of a valley. One belongs to sapiens, voices rising in song, hands carving delicate blades, bodies adorned with shells and pigments. The other belongs to Neanderthals, thicker voices echoing in the cold, strong hands shaping sturdy tools, bodies built for ice and stone. For thousands of years these fires burned within sight of one another. The encounters were not always sudden. Sometimes the evidence suggests there was coexistence for centuries. Valleys carried overlapping campsites, tools of different kinds lying side by side in the soil. Perhaps bands traded meat for flint, pigments for hides. Perhaps children of mixed blood played at the edges of those fires, their laughter echoing across the valley. These were moments of tentative coexistence, fragile as smoke. But encounters also carried tension. To sapiens, Neanderthals must have seemed both familiar and alien, faces close enough to recognize yet strange enough to fear. Their words were foreign, their rituals mysterious. To Neanderthals, sapiens may have appeared fragile yet relentless, multiplying quickly, carrying new tools and myths into every clearing. Suspicion lingered, a silence thick as fog between the fires. And then there were Denisovans, hidden in the mountains. Their world was harder to reach, but even there, sapiens eventually arrived. The encounters left no written record, only genetic traces in the blood of those who came after. Where words are lost, DNA remembers. These meetings were not only confrontations, but unions. The chorus of humanity was not sung in isolation, but in mingling, merging, and sometimes dissolving into one another. Imagine the psychology of such meetings. To stare across the flames at others who looked like kin yet were not. To wonder if they dreamed, if they feared, if they sang to their children as you sang to yours. The recognition must have been both comforting and unsettling. Here was proof that the world was not yours alone, but also a reminder that survival had competitors, and yet the fires burned together for a long time. Archaeology shows Neanderthals survived tens of thousands of years alongside sapiens before fading. The coexistence was not a single battle, but a prolonged tension, a shared history of shadow and light. In those years, choices were made: when to ally, when to fight, when to merge. Each decision rippled forward, shaping the fate of species. Close your eyes tonight and place yourself at the edge of one of those encounters. The cold air carries two fires' smoke. Behind you, your band murmurs and waits. Before you, the others stand in silence, their faces lit by orange glow. The decision rests in the space between steps: approach or retreat, share or strike. In that moment, the future of humanity balances on a knife's edge. for eventually the balance would tip. The encounters could not remain suspended forever. One fire would grow, the others would fade. The earth would not hold three kinds of humans forever. It would narrow, until only one voice sang loudly enough to endure. The competition began not with sudden wars, but with 1,000 small advantages stacking like stones into a wall. Sapiens carved blades so sharp they could slice hide with ease. They wove nets to trap fish, twisted fibres into rope, fashioned clothes stitched with bone needles. Innovation was no longer occasional, it was constant. Each new invention spread across bands like sparks across dry grass, multiplying strength through imagination. Neanderthals, though powerful, changed more slowly. Their tools were steady but lacked the restless churn of new forms. Their bands were smaller, their networks thinner. When famine struck, they endured with grit, but without the shared webs of trade and knowledge that carried sapiens across valleys and mountains. Denisovans, too, endured for a time in the high ranges of Asia, but their numbers were fragile, their territory isolated. The tide of sapiens rose, and with it came pressure on every frontier. Picture a hunt in Ice Age Europe. A band of Neanderthals charges a mammoth with thrusting spears, muscles straining, breath steaming in the cold. Across the ridge, sapiens wait with lighter javelins and coordinated voices. Their weapons fly in volleys, striking from a distance. The mammoth collapses, not from brute strength, but from strategy. Each encounter like this shifted the balance, incrementally, inexorably. And competition was not only for prey, it was for land, water, shelter, firewood. Sapiens multiplied swiftly, filling valleys with their fires. Neanderthal groups dwindled, hemmed in, pressured until survival became harder with each passing season. In some places, they may have fought back, raids flashing like lightning across the plains. In others, they merged, leaving descendants who carried both bloodlines. But slowly the separate voices thinned. The psychological tension of that age must have been immense. Imagine being a Neanderthal child, hearing stories of strangers who spoke differently, whose numbers seemed endless, whose tools gleamed like nothing your people could make. Fear and wonder intertwined. To the sapiens' child, Neanderthals were shadows at the edge of the firelight, both threat and kin. In that uncertainty, every choice mattered. Fight, flee, or join. But joining was not always enough. Even when bloodlines mingled, cultures did not. The myths of sapiens spread further, louder, until their songs drowned out the rest. In caves, the walls bore images of animals and symbols, left not by Neanderthals but by sapiens. The art was not only expression, it was dominance. To paint was to claim, to sing was to endure. And so the competition unfolded not only in flesh and blood, but in meaning itself. One species dreamed louder, imagined farther, and bound itself tighter. The others, though strong, faded into the quiet. Close your eyes and see the fires dimming one by one. Denisovans retreat into mountains. Neanderthals dwindle in forests. The chorus narrows. Only sapiens' fire spreads, multiplying across continents, filling the night with unbroken light. The competition had ended, but victory was not peace, for with triumph came a new silence, a silence where the voices of others should have been. And in that silence, sapiens faced a truth they could not ignore. To be the last was also to be alone. The Ice Age world had once been filled with voices. Different hands shaped stone, different tongues called across valleys, different fires burned in caves. Now, as Neanderthals and Denisovans faded, only sapiens remained. The silence of their absence was as profound as any invention, a hollow ringing in the human mind. Loneliness is not just the absence of sound. It is the awareness that no one else is coming. For the first time, our kind looked across the earth and realized that the companions who once shared its vastness were gone. No other humans stood at the edges of forests or mountains, no kin but us. Yet in this solitude, something strange happened. Our art grew richer, our myths grew deeper. Perhaps it was grief. Perhaps it was triumph. Perhaps both woven into one. On cave walls in Europe and Sulawesi, handprints multiplied. Hunters painted not only animals but abstract symbols, spirals and dots, as if searching for ways to speak to something beyond themselves. Flutes carved from bone filled caverns with sound. Beads of shell and ivory adorned bodies. Humanity answered silence with creation, but silence also bred unease. Did our ancestors sense that something had been lost? Around firelight they may have told stories of giants who once roamed, of strangers with heavy brows, of others who disappeared into mountains. Myths remember what memory forgets. Perhaps the tales of spirits and watchers in the dark were faint echoes of Neanderthal neighbours, shadows reshaped into legend. Survival in this new world was not easier. The Ice Age raged on, glaciers grinding across continents, storms lashing, coasts, famine striking when herds vanished. Yet sapiens endured, not with brute force, but with numbers, with networks, with imagination. Hunters shared across tribes, families traded shells and ochre, songs carried warnings from one valley to another. The world may have grown lonelier, but it also grew more connected. The psychological transformation was immense. Without rivals, we became our own reflection. We looked inward, questioning who we were and what we would become. The absence of others made us the measure of ourselves. The last of humanity stood not against competition, but against time, against the earth, against the vastness of their own imagination. Close your eyes and imagine walking through an abandoned Neanderthal cave. The fire pits are cold, the walls bare, the silence absolute. You press your hand against the stone, and for a moment it feels as if you are not alone, as if their presence still lingers. That silence is not empty, it is heavy, filled with echoes of what once was. And still, sapiens pressed forward. Across deserts, across ice, across oceans, they spread until every continent bore their mark. No longer was humanity divided into three. It had narrowed to one. But to be one meant carrying all the ghosts of the others, their genes, their strengths, their absence, all became part of us. And as our numbers grew, so did the weight of memory, the awareness that our survival was not only triumph, but inheritance. For the silence of the others was not the end of their story. It was the beginning of ours, a story that would soon stretch from survival into civilization. And the first spark of that shift was firelight, not only as warmth or weapon, but as the cradle of knowledge. Around the flames the transformation began. Fire was more than heat against the cold or safety from beasts. It was a classroom, a temple, a stage. It drew people together, binding bodies into tribes and tribes into cultures. By firelight, the mind stretched beyond survival, grasping for memory, imagination and meaning. Picture a circle of faces, eyes glowing orange in the flicker. An elder crouches forward, a stone in hand, carving its edge into a sharper blade. The children watch, learning silently, their minds absorbing skill through repetition. Knowledge no longer perished with a single life. It passed across generations like sparks leaping from one log to another. This was the revolution of fire, not its flame, but its light of continuity. But fire carried more than skill. It carried stories. Shadows on cave walls danced as elders spoke of hunts, of spirits, of ancestors. Fire was the first theatre, projecting myths against stone, painting the imagination with moving light. The stories tied individuals into a shared fabric, who they were, where they came from, why they endured. Through myth, humans began to believe not only in survival, but in destiny. This power became a weapon sharper than obsidian. Tribes with firelit myths stood stronger than those with silence. Belief gave courage. Shared stories made groups larger, more united, more willing to risk. The edge of survival shifted from physical strength to mental cohesion. Fire became the forge not only of tools but of identity. Imagine two tribes facing famine. One fractures, scattering into the night. The other, bound by ritual songs, endures together, each trusting the story of survival carried in their culture. When food returns, only one tribe remains whole. This was the hidden edge of sapiens. Not muscle, not bone, but belief made flesh. And belief demanded symbols. The flames flickered, illuminating carvings etched into wood, lines scratched onto bone, pigments smeared on skin. These were the seeds of writing long before ink or parchment. Marks meant memory. Symbols meant presence beyond the moment. To mark was to say, we will not vanish. In these gatherings, music rose. Bones hollowed into flutes carried haunting notes into the night. Rhythm bound feet together in dance. The tribe moved as one body, one breath. Fire made them more than the individuals. It made them a collective mind. Here was the birthplace of what we call culture, the invisible web that multiplied strength far beyond numbers. But culture also sharpened rivalry. Tribes bound tightly within themselves often looked outward with suspicion. Their myths cast others as strangers. Their dances marked identity. Their songs declared belonging. The same fire that united within could divide without. The paradox of humanity deepened. Together we survived. Apart we conquered. Close your eyes and hear the crackle of that ancient fire. The sparks rise like stars into the night sky, as if mirroring the first constellations we named. Around it, minds connected, ideas spread, and futures were imagined. Fire carried us from isolation into community, from ignorance into vision. And with this vision, the course of humanity tilted. For those who gathered around firelight did not simply endure, they prepared to create something larger than tribes, larger than survival. The next step would not only reshape the earth, it would decide which voices of humanity would remain and which would fade into silence forever. That step was expansion, not as migration, but as dominance. Sapiens spread in waves that became tides, filling landscapes once shared with others until the world itself bent beneath their presence. Every continent became a canvas, every shore a foothold. Where Neanderthals once hunted, our fires burned. Where Denisovans once breathed thin air, our descendants climbed. Where hobbits once endured in Flores, our shadows stretched. But triumph was not measured only in numbers. It was measured in survival written into blood. Genetic tests, like forensic whispers, reveal that those who vanished live on in fragments within us. 2% of Neanderthal still courses through our veins. Denisovan legacies shape lungs in the heights of Tibet and defences against ancient plagues. The silent are not gone. They linger inside us like voices in a dream, present even when unheard. This is not a metaphor. It is biology as memory. Every cell in your body carries the archive of encounters where love and survival intertwined. A sapiens and a Neanderthal once shared a fire, and because of that, part of them lives in you. A sapiens and a Denisovan once lay together in the dark, and their legacy still shapes breath and blood. We are mosaics, not singular lines. Imagine your body as a library. Each chromosome is a book. Most are sapiens, but a few pages, scattered like hidden verses, are written in Neanderthal script, in Denisovan ink. You're not only the descendant of survivors, you are the continuation of many kinds of humanity woven into one. The triumph of sapiens is not erasure, but absorption, and yet triumph is never clean. For every union there was conflict. For every child of two species there were battles where one fire smothered another. The truth of our legacy is double-edged. We are both the conquerors and the heirs of the conquered. To celebrate survival is also to remember loss. Close your eyes and step into a world 40,000 years ago. A tribe of sapiens gathers at dawn, their songs rising into mist. Nearby, A Neanderthal band dwindles, their fires shrinking. Somewhere in the mountains, Denisovans cling to survival. 3 voices, 3 kinds of humanity. Within a few millennia, only one will remain in flesh, but all 3 will remain in blood. This is our inheritance. A lineage not pure, but layered, hybrid, resilient. We are the chorus of all who came before, whether we remember their names or not. In our bones, their strength. In our breath, their endurance. In our minds, their shadows. And perhaps this is why our triumph carried such weight. To survive was not only to conquer, but to carry forward the sparks of those who could not. The silence of their fires became the fuel for ours. But inheritance alone was not enough. To endure beyond survival, to rise beyond the Ice Age, humanity needed something greater still, something that could bind memory into permanence, turning echoes into legacy. That something was the story itself. Stories were more than entertainment. They were survival encoded in memory. Around the fire, myths carried warnings about rivers that drowned hunters, mountains where storms brewed, valleys where predators stalked. A tale told was a map across generations, a compass in a world without writing. Children who listened to stories did not need to stumble blindly into danger. They carried the wisdom of ancestors like an invisible shield. But stories were not only warnings, they were bridges. When tribes met, stories could be traded as surely as shells or flint. A tale of how the moon was born, a song of spirits in the forest, a chant about the hunt. These became the first diplomacy, softening suspicion, creating bonds where silence had once reigned. A shared story could turn strangers into kin. The psychological power of narrative was staggering. To speak of a past no one remembered or a future no one had seen was to weave imagination into reality. A hunter who believed in the story of his people fought harder. A child who carried the myth of survival endured hunger with hope. Stories transformed fear into meaning, pain into purpose. Imagine a night 30,000 years ago. A woman's voice rises in song, her words spinning images of a great beast slain, of ancestors watching from the stars, of children destined to inherit the earth. The flames crackle, the shadows dance, and for a moment every heart in the circle beats to the same rhythm. That rhythm is stronger than hunger, stronger than fear. It is identity made sound. And in this, sapiens triumphed. Neanderthals may have spoken, Denisovans may have sung, but it was sapiens who turned story into structure, myth into monument. Our tales stretched across tribes, binding larger networks, carrying shared visions farther than footsteps could travel. The story became our true homeland, a place where anyone who believed belonged. This triumph left traces still with us. Why do we tell myths of floods, of giants, of lost golden ages? Perhaps because our ancestors lived through extinctions, through encounters with others who vanished, through silences that demanded explanation. Stories filled the void left by loss. They gave shape to grief, turning absence into legend. But stories were also dangerous. They could divide as easily as unite. One tribe's myth might declare them chosen, another cursed. Belief could justify war, sharpen difference, fuel conquest. The same force that wove humanity together could also tear it apart. The double edge of narrative became the double edge of our destiny. Close your eyes and think of your own story, where you come from, who you belong to, what meaning you carry into the night. This inheritance is ancient. Every myth told today, whether whispered to a child at bedtime or shouted in a crowded stadium, descends from those first firelit tales. Stories allowed us to survive, but more than that, they allowed us to imagine survival beyond survival. They gave us vision, and vision remade the world. And as the Ice Age began to thaw, those visions stretched further still. They did not stop at caves or valleys. They began to shape entire landscapes, transforming wilderness into home. The earth itself was about to become a canvas for our story. When the glaciers began to retreat and rivers swelled with meltwater, humans stepped out of caves and into a world remade. Valleys opened, forests spread, herds moved northward. What had once been wilderness became landscape, and what had been landscape became home. We did not simply walk across it, we reshaped it. Every fire set to clear a field, every trap dug for game, every path carved through woods was a brushstroke in the new canvas of earth. But hidden beneath this expansion were scars. Our DNA carried the memory of bottlenecks, of near extinctions where only a few thousand survived. Those ancient trials haunted us, shaping instincts of caution and fear. Why do we hoard food? Why do we dread silence? Why do we cling to kin with such ferocity? These are echoes of an age when scarcity and loneliness pressed like jaws against our species. The scars in our genome are as real as any cave painting, marks of survival written in flesh. Imagine a child born 20,000 years ago. Around the fire, she listens to tales of spirits in mountains and monsters in rivers. She does not know these stories are coded with fear from the bottleneck, warnings that danger waits in hunger, in drought, in absence. When she grows, she passes these tales to her own children. Thus, trauma becomes myth, and myth becomes heritage. We carry those stories still, and yet scars are not only wounds, they are proofs of healing. Our near extinction did not destroy us, it honed us. The memory of loss pushed us to cooperate more fiercely, to imagine more boldly, to build cultures that could withstand famine and storm. We became not just survivors, but architects of resilience. Look around the modern world, and you can still see these ancient shadows. Cities with walls, families with traditions, religions with myths of floods and rebirth. All are descendants of primal fears and primal triumphs. The earth is covered not just with roads and buildings, but with the unseen architecture of memory, built from the scars of the past. The psychological truth is unsettling. We're haunted by dangers that no longer exist. We fear the dark because once predators watched from its edges. We store wealth because once famine killed entire tribes. We tell stories of destruction and salvation because once humanity nearly ended. Our scars are our compass, pointing us away from dangers long gone, yet still alive in our blood. Close your eyes and imagine Earth as a palimpsest, a manuscript written, erased, and written again. Underneath every modern line lies an ancient one. Beneath every myth, a memory. Beneath every survival, a scar. We are not only authors of history, but its living parchment, carrying the traces of what came before. And so, as sapiens spread across continents, the Earth itself became more than a home. It became a mirror. Its rivers, forests and plains reflected our fears, our resilience, our relentless will to endure. But scars are not only reminders of the past, they are warnings for the future. For in every story of survival lies the same question. What happens when the scars are forgotten, and the lessons they hold are ignored? The scars of our species are easy to miss. They are not carved on cliffs or buried with bones. They live within us, in the curve of our DNA, in the instincts that flare when night falls, in the unease that stirs when silence grows too deep. They whisper of hunger once endured, of dangers once faced, of near endings survived by a fragile few. But forgetting is our gift and our peril. To move forward, we push aside the weight of the past. We walk streets lit by neon and think we are far from caves. We sit in houses of steel and glass and think we have outgrown the fire. Yet inside us, ancient reflexes twitch. We lock doors at night as if wolves still prowl. We fear strangers as if rival tribes still wait beyond the valley. The bottleneck lives on not only in genes but in habits, in echoes of a time when survival was a blade's edge. Imagine the last gathering of survivors after a great drought 100,000 years ago. A band shrinks to a few dozen, their ribs showing through skin, their eyes hollow. Yet they endure. passing through the desert until they find water. Every person alive today descends from those who crossed that threshold. Their suffering did not vanish, it became inheritance. And with inheritance came warning. Life is fragile, existence precarious, survival never guaranteed. We carry that warning still, but in whispers rather than shouts. Our bodies remember famine, yet we waste food. Our genomes remember disease, yet we tempt plague. Our ancestors feared extinction, yet we act as if the earth will always bear us. Forgetting is dangerous, for scars exist to remind us not to fall into the same abyss twice. And yet, scars are also unifiers. Beneath differences of skin, language and nation, all sapiens carry the same ancient marks. The fusion of chromosomes, the fragments of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA, the traces of near extinction. These are not the heritage of one people, but of all. We are bound not by division, but by survival itself. Our shared scars are proof that humanity is one story, no matter how many chapters it writes. Close your eyes and listen to your heartbeat. In its rhythm, you carry survivors of deserts, voyagers of oceans, hunters of mammoths, dreamers who painted walls with ochre. Each beat is an echo of them. Each breath is proof that they did not vanish in vain. We are the continuation of all their struggles, all their victories, all their scars. The question then is not whether we remember them. It is whether we honour them. To live without gratitude is to let their suffering dissolve into nothing. To live with awareness is to carry their warning forward. That survival is never owed. That endurance must be earned again and again. And so we arrive at the threshold of the final chapter. For in the story of humanity, scars are not only reminders, they are also promises. Promises that the silence of the past does not mean the silence of the future. Promises that our unity is older, deeper, and stronger than our divisions. We are the species that does not give up. When rivers dried and skies turned to ash, when numbers fell to barely more than 1,000 souls, we endured. Against cold, against hunger, against the silence of extinction, we carried fire forward. Every person alive today is proof of that miracle, a living monument to the resilience of a fragile band who refused to vanish. But their story is not only survival, it is warning. The earth does not forget. The same forces that nearly erased us, climate, famine, fire, flood, still breathe beneath our feet. The scars of the past are not fossils, they are blueprints etched into our being. They remind us that survival is not guaranteed, that arrogance can blind, that forgetting can destroy. Yet their story is also promise. We carry within us the strengths of many, the endurance of Denisovans, the power of Neanderthals, the daring of those who crossed oceans to Sulawesi before history began. We are not one lineage, but many woven into one. The unity we seek is already in our blood. To divide ourselves is to deny the truth written in our cells, that we are mosaics of survival, children of every kind of human who ever lived. Close your eyes and listen to the world around you. The hum of machines, the whisper of wind, the pulse of your own heartbeat. Beneath it all is an older rhythm, the footsteps of ancestors walking out of Africa, the songs sung in caves, the cries of infants born in shelters of stone. Their echoes are in us still. We are their continuation, their voice carried forward through time. The anthem of humanity is not triumph alone, it is responsibility. To carry the flame is to guard it. To inherit survival is to protect it. The story of those 1,280 survivors is not only past, it is present, it is future. It warns us not to take abundance for granted, not to repeat the silence that once nearly consumed us. And so we stand at another threshold. 8 billion strong, we have turned Earth into our canvas, our crucible, our burden. The same imagination that painted bison on cave walls now builds cities that shine brighter than stars. But the question remains the same as it was in the Ice Age. Will we endure together or fracture apart? Will our stories bind us into one fire or divide us into sparks that fade in the wind? The promise of our ancestors is that we are capable of more. We are the species that dreams beyond the horizon, that crosses seas before we know what lies beyond, that carries stories into futures unseen. Their survival carved a path, and we walk it still. Never forget, the silence of the others is not their ending. It is our inheritance. Their voices live on in our breath, in our bones, in the rhythm of our blood.